Hello and welcome to The Game Changers. I'm Sue Anstis, and this is the podcast where you'll hear from trailblazing women in sport who are knocking down the barriers and challenging the status quo for women and girls everywhere. What can we learn from their journeys as we explore some of the key issues around equality in sport and beyond? I'd like to start with a big thank you to our sponsors, Sport England, who support the Game Changers podcast through a National Lottery Award. My guest today is Sabrina Pace-Humphreys, an ultra-runner, award-winning businesswoman, social justice activist, mother of 4, grandmother of 3, a personal trainer, running coach, and co-founder and trustee of the community and campaigning charity Black Trail Runners. Oh yes, and she's now also a race director and an author too. In 2023, Sabrina appeared on the TV series Survivor, and she was also featured on the front cover of Runner's World. Sabrina recently published her memoir, Black Sheep, a story of rural racism, identity and hope. It's a very personal story of growing up as a black child on the poverty line in a small town in England. It's an incredibly moving and powerful book that I would urge you all to read. Finding running after suffering from postnatal depression sparked something inside Sabrina that made her want to help others use running, and trail running in particular, to manage their mental health. Sabrina, you obviously have achieved so much in your life so far, and I really struggled to know where to start in talking to you. Your book, Black Sheep, had a huge impact on me personally. I'd like to come back to that if I can, but I wonder if I can start with you as a runner. And I mentioned in the introduction you'd found running after postnatal depression. So can you talk to us about how running came into your life?
Yeah, and thank you for having me on. It's amazing to be here. How running came into my life, if anything, running was kind of my nemesis growing up. It was something that, a sport that I didn't see myself represented in. I felt it was a sport that kind of was only for a certain demographic of little girl or young adult like me. But I was introduced to running, or I was given the idea of, why not try going for a jog? After I'd had my 4th child in 2009, and I was experiencing, as I talk about within the book, quite a severe episode of postnatal depression. The illness had taken me over so much that I didn't even know what I was going through. All I knew was that I was very disconnected to my baby. I was disconnected to myself, my family, my business, everything. And it was only at the 12-week postnatal check when I went to my GP, as many parents do, to check over the baby and to check you over, that my GP picked up quite quickly that all was not well, in the sense of the answers to the questions that she was asking me, the responses that I was giving, and diagnosed postnatal depression. And as one of the tools to cope, I have no shame, I was prescribed medication, talk therapy, but also amongst that, she said to me, I really want you to do something that kind of almost just gives you a little bit of headspace away from the family, away from the baby, away from your normal everyday life. Why not try jogging? And I kind of looked at her like she was kind of from another planet, because jogging is, again, it was, just not something that a place I ever saw myself. I didn't like it, or I didn't think I liked it. I didn't like that form of movement. So it was this foreign activity to me. And for a couple of days, I very much kind of went against her advice, because I was like, that's not going to help me. If anything, that's going to make me feel worse. But I was so ill that I just knew that if a doctor is telling me that I need to do this, I should try this. I didn't even have any running gear. I put on a baggy t-shirt, a painting t-shirt, as many of us will have, a pair of baggy trousers, a pair of old school Dunlops, not even proper running shoes because I didn't have them. And I went down to what actually was a trail, although I didn't know it was a trail. It was the Canal Towpath. and I shuffled my way along a out and back, half a mile out, half a mile back. It was a 1 minute walk, 1 minute shuffle, and all I could think about was breathing, was not falling in the canal, was moving my body, which I'd put on a lot of weight, in a way that allowed me to get home. And when I got home and I fell in the door because I lost my legs, fell in the door, and I was lying on the kitchen floor, and my husband was kind of said to me, you know, are you okay? And I looked up at him and I said, I'm in such physical pain, but I realized that for 45 or so minutes that I hadn't had any thoughts about my own life, about the value of me being on the earth, because that's where these depressive thoughts were taking me, that I was no use to anyone. I couldn't do anything right. I didn't have connection. I realized I'd had none of those intrusive thoughts because all I could think about was moving my body forward, was breathing. And although it was painful on my body, I, from that moment, knew that I would want to go out again because that headspace, that release and freedom that moving my body forward gave me was addictive. I wanted more of that.
And it's fair to say your journey in running progressed pretty rapidly. So from that canal, run, walk, shuffle, but moving on to 5Ks and then marathons. How soon were you running at that level, and how many marathons did you do?
Yeah, so I did my first marathon in 2011. So that was 3 years after that. And I think that when it came to running, because that headspace that it gave me in terms of mental health management, or mental illness management at the beginning, quickly translated to me, okay, well, you know, I've done a mile. Can I do a mile and a half? You know, I've done a mile and a half. Can I do 2? And then that translated to, well, what do people that run do, like, in order to put goals in place for their running? Well, 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon. And that led me on that journey of understanding a little bit more about what running was, about the community, about being a woman, being a mother as a runner, and the barriers that I faced there in terms of training and in terms of, again, you know, seeing myself represented as a mother, as a female out there within the running community. And also it led me into joining a UK athletics local run club, and that what that looked like and how that fitted and didn't fit into my life. So, you know, the journey, that progression, yeah, it was quite quick because I've always sought to understand how far I can get in a certain discipline, whether that's business, whether it is my social life and hobbies, or now whether it is the sport that I choose to use as a way to still, first and foremost, manage a very stressful, busy life, but ultimately how to challenge how far I can go within this sport. How far can my body take me? What can my body do? And to translate that into now kind of, you know, being in the position that I am, leading communities and, you know, run coaching and personal training to help other women, other communities in order to understand what they can do. And
you, as if a marathon wasn't far enough, the first kind of major ultra challenge you then took on was Marathon de Sable. So can you explain?
De Sable, yeah.
De Sable. Can you explain that kind of race for those that might not know it and how it came about to take, and again, another kind of jump and shift onto something that's quite extraordinary from doing, I say just marathons, but doing marathons?
Well, yeah, I mean, part of my story that you'll read about in my book, and again, I think it's really important to talk about this as part of my journey, is that as a method to cope with unresolved trauma, with stress, over the years, I developed a dependency and addiction to alcohol. I was what they would call a high functioning alcoholic. So to all intents and purposes, you would see me in business, you would see me on the street, you would see me looking after my children, you would say, hey, that's a woman that's got it all together. Whereas in the background, actually, I was struggling. And to cope with that, in order to numb from that, what was one one glass of wine turned into two, turned into half a bottle, turned into an addiction to alcohol. So I sought recovery. I knew that, I needed help, and I found a fellowship for other people who drink the way that I do and have the addiction that I do, in order to help me recover, in order to help me stay sober a day at a time, in order to live. And as part of that journey, my sponsor had said to me, it's really, you've got to get busy living. And I was running at that time, but I needed something more. I needed something else. I needed a focus, because I was coming up to my 40th birthday. And with the life that I had left, I knew that, in a past life, had I got to my 40th birthday, it would have been a big weekend of partying, alcohol involved, champagne corks popping, all of that. And I knew that I needed to focus on something to celebrate the fact that I'd made it to 40. And it was one night that it was a Saturday night. It was early in recovery. I was flicking around the TV channels, and I flicked onto the Discovery Channel, and all I heard was this Northern Irish guy who was a voiceover on this program. And he was saying, this is James Cracknell, Olympic athlete. He is taking part in the toughest foot race on earth, the Marathon de Sable, 153-mile multi-stage ultra marathon in the Sahara Desert. And that cut then to a photo of James hooked up to an IV, bringing up bile, this Olympic elite athlete. And I was hooked. I was like, what is this? What causes an athlete like that to behave in this manner? And it was an hour program, and it was a documentary about the Marathon de Sable, which has the strapline of the toughest foot race on earth. But yet, to all intents and purposes, it's 250k, 153 miles, multi-stage, so multi-day. You carry everything you need on your back, absolutely everything, from clothing to fuel to water to medical kit, all of it. And over 5 days, you traverse a route in the Sahara Desert, 45 degree to 50 degree temperatures, and you are responsible for yourself. And when that program finished, I thought, oh my God, why the hell would anyone do that to themselves? But there was a little spark inside that was like, I wonder if I could do that. I wonder if this mum of four, grandmother of one at that time, I wonder if I could do that. I wonder if this is the thing. I wonder if I could even get in. And it took me to opening the laptop on the day registrations opened for the 2018 race. And I signed up, and that took me on an 18-month journey to train, mostly in the UK, to run and compete in the Marathon de Sable in 2018, 2 months after I turned 40.
And you've continued on with these extraordinary ultra challenges. So just bringing us up to date from 2018 to now, what was the incredible challenge you did just at the end of 2023?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So from crossing the finish line as the 11th British woman at the Marathon de Sable in 2018, it led me on a journey of adventure, of wanting to explore the outdoors via trail running, explore the world via trail running, a world that I'd only ever seen in picture books. I grew up, we were very poor. I didn't go abroad until I was 17. And it led me, ultimately to do many different ultra marathons around the world, and the latest one being what's called the Winter Downs 200, which I started on the 13th of December 2023. And that is a 210 mile, let's get that right, trail loop around the southeast of England. Continuous, the clock starts and it doesn't stop until you either pull out or you cross the finish line. It takes on board 5 national trails: the North Downs Way, the South Downs Way, the Vanguard's Way, St Swithin's Way, and Wayfarer's Walk. And you choose if and when you sleep, you choose if and when you eat. And I am so happy that I can say to you, because it was one of the hardest things, even though it was the UK, The UK trails in winter are a force to be reckoned with. But I crossed the finish line as 8th woman.
Oh, wow.
And it was at times like a living nightmare. I think that the very difficult thing about this race was it was 16 hours per day in darkness. It's, the shortest days of the year. One of the things I absolutely adore and I advocate about ultra running is it doesn't matter how fast or slow you are. For me, it's the journey. I'll be out on a trail run, and I'll look around and I can see the hill I'm running to. I can see where I've been. I see the most amazing views. It gives me so much more than it takes trail running. Whereas it's a very different beast when you're out for 16 hours a day and all you can see is what your head torch is showing in front of you. And it feels like, I don't see if you've ever had those nightmares where you're just running and not getting anywhere. And that is what it is like. And I think that was what the hardest thing about this ultra, and why when I finished it, I struggled to comprehend what I had done, because for 16 hours every day, I was in that deep, dark place that many athletes have to go to. And it's our ability to get ourselves out of there when we're doing these challenges, especially that are solo. I didn't know how or when I would be able to get myself out. But it's that well of resilience that I think I've developed throughout my life circumstances that give me this unique set of tools that I'm able to continue to move forward and know that ultimately with the darkness, the light will always come. And yeah, to finish it was a week before Christmas, in the arms of my husband, who was at the finish line, my best friend, my crew, was a real moment. And it was the first buckle that I've ever got for a race. So yeah, I'm really glad to sit here today and say that I did actually finish it, because it was, I think, 43 people pulled out.
Tell me about a buckle for a race. What, for those that might not be familiar?
We all know that for most races, you'll get a medal. When it comes to ultra marathons, what they've started to do within the industry is give buckles. So almost like big belt buckles. And that belt buckle normally has engraved into it the race and, a logo and stuff like that. But it's like the next step up from a medal. It's like you can't wear it around your neck. So you either display it or you buy a special belt to wear it with. So it was the first ever buckle that I've ever had for a race. And yeah, it felt like I'd really earned it. And, but I was no use to anyone at Christmas. Let's just put it out there now. I could barely walk. I was very emotional. I think over the course of the race, I'd had 3 hours sleep. So sleep deprived, hallucinating. Just everything that goes into when you put your body out there and you're asking more from it than it ever felt it was capable to give. So yeah, I'm just about recovered.
This is really interesting, isn't it? I'm interested in how you sort of mentally push yourself through that pain and discomfort and distress during a grueling race. I spoke to Chrissy Wellington on the podcast. She was actually in the first series of the podcast and talked about during Ironman her mental approach when she reflects back when it's really tough, that she knows she's done this before. So that is what she tells herself is, we have been here before and we can do it again. Which, when I think about what you're doing, you almost haven't been, you're doing different distances or different, it isn't necessarily a place you've been in the past. So what is it you feel takes you to enable you? And is it something that not anyone could do, but do you think with the right mindset and, people are capable of doing it? Or do you think it's something quite unique that you have?
I think in terms of the well of resilience that I'm able to dip into, that deep, dark place where when many people decide enough is enough, that I'm able to go even deeper. I think nothing is as bad as feeling as a child that your life is at risk. And for me, in terms of ultra marathons, I know my body is strong, but I know my mind is stronger. And when it comes to traversing hundreds of miles, distances of hundreds of miles in a race scenario, it's a head game. It's a head game, and for me, I believe that if you have been through, whether you've trained yourself to or whether your life circumstances just dictate that you've been in situations where, for me, as I say, I fear for my life, in childhood, in adulthood, in terms of situations I've been in, nothing compares to that. So the things I tell myself is like, this is, and I was really reflecting on this after the race, the mantras I tell myself, or the things I tell myself is, this is a choice. This is your choice, Sabrina. How much can you endure? How much more can you endure? But always remember, you are choosing this. This isn't being inflicted upon you, and you have no choice as to whether to continue. And I think it's really, really important always. And I think the social activism work, or the work with the charity that I do now, in the sense of breaking down barriers to the outdoors via the act of trail running, I am privileged to be able to do things like this. There are many hundreds of thousands of millions of people that will never get the opportunity to do what I do. And it's these things that I continue to tell myself when my feet are bleeding, when I'm suffering with GI issues, I can't keep food down, when I'm hallucinating, I'm seeing people on the trail that aren't there, when it feels as though there is no more to give. I can dig very, very deep in order to remember this is nothing like the mental pain that you have been through, and this is a choice.
Clearly, you're not early in this journey, but you've been running for some time. Are there other big races and challenges that are still on your bucket list? I see you almost like a Forrest Gump, running across the whole of the world as every race is getting longer and further. But how do you balance that?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different adventures, explorations that I want to take. I'm so inspired by things that I've seen online. I think for me, what I really want to do, either this year or next year, I think it's probably looking like next year, is that I'd really like to do the Le Jog. I'd like to run from Land's End to John O'Groats on trails as a continuous journey. There's something around kind of, really reclaiming this land, my home, and telling my story, but also the stories of others while I'm doing that. There's something around that journey that, and this, that's an 870 odd mile journey. And there's something around doing that certainly is an adventure that I want to take, but also, bigger than that, as I say, different trails around the world, different places that, especially those people from that I'd advocate but from historically marginalized communities, deprived communities, that at the moment they see those things and they can only dream of them. And I want to inspire and show bit by bit, with the right support, we can do things that are beyond our wildest dreams. And as I say, as a little girl, I saw the Sahara Desert in picture books. I never believed that I would run there. And I remember standing at the top of a sand dune, and it was as the sun was setting, and this golden light was kind of sweeping the landscape. And I just remember this feeling of massive spiritual connection with the land and with my place on earth. And I want so many more people to feel that, whether that is in their own backyard and exploring and adventuring places locally that they'd never been, or whether it is the world. I want to be that conduit to everyone feeling that they can have that sense of adventure. And
in terms of trail running, I think, just to clarify, it doesn't need to be on hills and outward canal paths and so on. Anywhere outside in terms of not on the road, as it were.
That's it. Yeah, not on the road. And that's the thing, trail running, it's anywhere. For me, my definition of trail running is anywhere that's not your concrete, your tarmac. So whether that's a park, park run, a lot of park runs are basically trail runs because they take place, fields, parks, etc., etc. But, canal tow paths, local green space. If you're getting off the road, you're trail running.
I was just reflecting from a female perspective. It is interesting that we're seeing so many women excelling in ultra running now. And I wonder whether that physiology, the fact that women deal with regular pain, often with periods, with endometritis, with childbirth, etc., whether that does impact that. Because we are seeing a difference of when you look across all sports, actually in ultra running, women really are excelling.
Yeah, we do. I mean, you have Jasmine Paris, who has the female record for moving on the Pennine Way, you know, the spine race, 268 miles non-stop. You know, I did that 2 years ago. You have people, you know, women like Nikki Spinks, you know, an older trail runner who's going out there winning races, etc., etc. You have Camille Herron, a US ultra runner who's a world record holder. The data shows that when it comes to running, endurance running, you know, men are kind of leading the charge up to a specific distance. But when you get over a specific ultra distance, women are competing on a level. And I do believe, as you said, and I think the data, it is what our physiology. I think it is our pain thresholds. I think it is our mental endurance. I think it is all of these different physiological and mental skills, biological, genetic that we have, that when it comes to specific distances, we are able to go longer. I think it's also partly because, and it's something that I saw when I was doing the Winter Downs 200, we deal with so much as women. We have to juggle so many different balls. And in order to do that, a lot of us have to really kind of plan, you know, time block, etc., etc. So when I was doing the Winter Downs 200, a big part of it was for me is, Sabrina, you have nothing to prove at the start. Like, do not get caught up in the melee of going fast and of showing subconsciously and consciously, look how strong I am. When it comes to endurance running, it's not about that. It's who slows down the slowest. It's managing your body. It's managing every element of what it takes in order to keep you moving. Are you eating regularly? Are you drinking regularly? Are you looking after those small problems before they become bigger? And I just believe wholeheartedly that women have a capacity to do that better than men when it comes to endurance running. And we see that in the records that are being broken, in the adventures and the FKTs that are being smashed. Courtney Dauwalter, US ultramarathon runner, who has been doing the most amazing things over the past couple of years when it comes to ultra running. So, you know, we really have to own that. You know, let's own it. Let's inspire other women, other girls, in order to know that this is an option for you. This is a real option for you. And let's do everything we can to empower.
Do you ever get concerned about the impact on your body of so much running? Says a woman here who had I had a hip op in 2019, and I haven't run since then. I haven't run since 2018. But reading your book has made me sign up for the NHS couch to 5K, and I started running again. Yes. There you are. You're having an amazing impact. But here's your impact on just one woman reflected there. So it's almost like I've stopped running. I thought, I'm never going to run again because of my hip. And then I've kind of seen all that you're doing and thought, no, I should just get started again, shouldn't I? So, but does that concern you, almost that constant impact on joints and so on?
You know, the reason I qualified as a personal trainer is I take out 2 local women's run groups. It's called Stroud Mums on the Run. And I started it in 2016 because I knew that I wanted to do something that felt like I was making an impact on people's lives. And what I was experiencing when I started that up was a lot of women were coming to me. I've been quite lucky in my running career to really never experience injury, serious injury that stopped me. But a lot of my women were complaining of knee pain, hip pain, lower back pain. And I was like, I want to have the qualifications in order to help them with this. So I qualified as a personal trainer because I was under the guidance of a personal trainer, and the strength and conditioning work that I was doing, I believe, was helping me to do what I was doing in the ultra world. Having that strong core, strong gluteus muscles, strong legs, strong shoulders to hold packs. And I wasn't getting injured. And I'm a real advocate of especially for women getting to a certain age as we mature. Just because you embark upon a strength and conditioning program doesn't mean you're going to look at like the Hulk if you don't want to. But what it does mean is I believe it helps us to continue to move in a way that is joyful and a way that is kinder to our bodies for longer, especially when it comes to osteoporosis in perimenopausal and menopausal women. So I do that. I do my strength and conditioning 2 times a week, just 2 times a week, 40 minutes. And that has helped me, I believe, to alleviate injury, keeping me strong, keeping me flexible with my mobility work, and keeping me able to do what I love, which is running. So I think also the fact that I'm a trail runner, so when I'm running on that ground, it's working with me rather than against me. I do a lot of muddy running at the moment. So, there's a lot of squishing, which lessens that impact upon the joints. But I think the form of running I do, how I train, how I really feel into intuitively in terms of what my body needs and wants, protein, rest, recovery, sleep, it enables me to function at a level that other 45, almost 46-year-olds struggle to. And I believe it's because of the training and the cross training that I do. So no, Sue, I don't worry about it. I think since I've become perimenopausal and other things have come in, I'm more aware now as to how to manage my body. For example, last year I suffered with a bout of Achilles tendonitis. And I thought it was something that I was doing within my training. And actually what it turned, a physiotherapist said to me, well, of course, because tendonitis is more apparent within perimenopausal and menopausal women. And I had never heard this before. And when I started talking about it, my followers were like, Sab, we've never heard this before. So that led me down a path of working with a physio and increasing my uptake in collagen and amending training specifically in order to rehab from that. So now I'm kind of starting to get into that realm of dealing with kind of things that just due to hormone levels, et cetera, starting to impact me that I need to very much be aware of, because I want to run as long as I can. I love it. It helps me to cope with the stresses and the strains of life.
I'd love to move on to your work around Black Trail Runners. In 2020, you co-founded, you're now a trustee of Black Trail Runners. So what was the ambition of the community at the time?
So the ambition of the community really came from an experience that I talk about in the book, where I was trail running in France and I slipped off the side of a trail in a snowfield in the mountains, and I was screaming for my life, knowing that if I fell, I would either die or I would be very seriously injured, life-changing. And I was passed by 5 white male runners and ignored as if I wasn't there, as if I was invisible. It was a very harrowing experience. I was pulled up by a man, the 6th man, but it made me really question my place in this sport. It made me question my safety as a woman of colour, and whether I belonged here. It made me want to not run anymore because I didn't feel safe. That was late 2019. Then we went into 2020 and we went into lockdown. We had the murder of a black runner in America called Ahmaud Arbery, and the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. And the running community globally, especially runners of colour, were saying, like, are we safe here? I don't feel safe here. We had the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. And in that whole time, that early 2020, I was actively searching for a trail running community that first and foremost was a safe space for runners of colour. And it wasn't there. So I was like, I've got to create it. I've got to create this community that I so desperately need. I reached out to a couple of people. I'd heard one of them on a podcast. I'd been introduced to another one by a friend who I'd reached out to, who heads up a London running collective. And we got together on Zoom and we said, this is kind of what we want to create, a community that is around creating community, number one, but also starting to talk about why there is such a lack of diversity within the outdoors via the act of trail running. Why is this a very dominant white sport? Why is it a dominant male sport? What is it? What are the barriers? How can we campaign on these as well? And in July 2020, we launched Black Trail Runners. We had no idea. If it would take off or not. But what I knew is I've at least met a couple of other people who love the outdoors too, that will hopefully be my friends forever, that I can run with. And from the moment we pressed launch, it went crazy globally. with people of colour saying, finally, a community for us, finally, people who want to talk about and challenge event organisers and challenge policymakers and challenge organisations around what they're doing in order to diversify this sport. You know, there's this myth that running is for everyone, but running is not for everyone. Running is marketed as being for everyone, but there are barriers that exist, not just for historically marginalized communities, ethnic communities, but also for disadvantaged communities, for those people who are socially, economically disadvantaged. You know, you say that all you need is a pair of trainers for running, but it's a fallacy. And what we seek to do is address these misconceptions around access to the outdoors via trail running, transportation costs, access, navigation. You know, the fact that a lot of the communities of colour, black communities in the UK are urbanised to big cities. How do you find green spaces? How do you even know where to look? How do you navigate them? Skills. How do you trail run? How is trail running different to road running? If you're not told, if you're not educated, how would you ever know? And representation. That's another thing we work on, is you can't be what you can't see. But more than that, because I believe that that's kind of coming full circle, it's that you have to hear stories from or see people represented that not only look like you, but potentially have that same social background as you. So it's taking that representation piece and saying, look, I'm here doing this. Come join community, come be educated, come be inspired, because you belong here too. And together, if we can enable, if we can inspire, if we can support communities that do not see themselves in the outdoors via the act of trail running, then that's when we create a truly global running scene. And where we started that up in 2020, and we became a charity in 2021. Last year, I was race director at our very first highlight event, which was Black to the Trails. And we'd been told in our work by race organisers and brands, you know, we've tried to diversify this sector. We've tried to do this. It hasn't worked. And what we said is the reason it hasn't worked is because you do not have people with the lived experience, a diverse board or workforce or project lead that has those community connections, that understands what elements need to be in these events in order for the people to come. So we did it. We said we're going to have to do this ourselves. So Black to the Trails, our trail running event, the world's most diverse trail running event we had last year. We held it at Dunstable Downs last May, and it was beautiful and it was joyful and it was a carnival, and the pictures that you'll see and the videos that are out there, this is what a diverse outdoors looks like. And we're doing it again this year. We're doing it again on the 12th of May, and it's going to be bigger and better. And again, I'm race organising and project leading it, but it gives back so much more than it takes. And just to see that joy in the trails, in the outdoors, 70% people of colour last year, 70% female, which absolutely smashes all data around trail running. That's what I live for. It's those moments.
It's fabulous. And I will put a link in the show notes to the race for people to register for next year as well too. It's so lovely to hear your amazing passion for the whole of the change you're driving. Do you think things are changing? So obviously you're doing amazing things and you've created the group and the success of Black to the Trails, but is the sector changing? Are the other events, because that's where the true impact happens, isn't it, in terms of other race organisers, other people within the running sector? Are you seeing that change happening?
I think what I've seen very much over the last 3 years, and I think it's a great question to ask, I saw, in 2020, I don't know if you can remember Black Square Tuesday.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, it was a Tuesday where various brands within the outdoors kind of said, we need to do better, be better, etc. Funds were put into diverse ED&I initiatives, and And for a time, there was, a bit of hope within the community that these could be sustainable projects. What we've seen happen over the last couple of years, in the last 18 months in particular, is backpedaling. Whereas we took 3 steps forward, we've taken 2 steps back. What you see is budget being pulled, project leads, ED&I, chiefs being, made redundant, et cetera, et cetera. The industry needs to continue to take serious action when it comes to this. We are more than a moment. This is about more than a trend. We are not a trend. This is our lives. This is our right in order to experience this form of movement in the outdoors. So my answer to that, Sue, is that there is much more work that needs to be done. And that work, that consultation work, which leads to intentional action, needs to be led by people such as myself and other community leaders who have their fingers on the pulse in terms of how to make this change and how to ultimately create sustainability. Because our communities want this. And don't get me wrong, although there are barriers to financial access, we have money to spend when it comes to products, services, etc. Unfortunately, there aren't enough CEOs or CMOs or boards that really understand that, because they're only seeing this rise in popularity through a specific lens. So there's much work to be done, Sue, and I'm here for it. And it's something that I'm very passionate about. And the change that I've seen through what we've done, there is no reason that cannot be translated. And we have various events who are friends of Black trail runners, event organizers, who are doing great things. But there will always be that tipping point we reach. There are many, many more that can be replicating that, or can be finding a way in order to address this lack of ethnicity, this lack of diversity, with simple steps. But it does involve them asking themselves uncomfortable questions in terms of whether they see a new demographic of trail runner as a demographic that they want to serve.
If I can take you back just to your life growing up in the Cotswolds as a young girl, I mean, you've mentioned the book a couple of times, and I would absolutely say it had a huge impact on me. I finished it in a day, which says something, doesn't it? But you write so eloquently. I was just couldn't stop. But I would really recommend it, because you write so eloquently about your experience. And I found it really moving, but very enlightening as well, too. So can you give us a little of your history of growing up in a town where no one looked like you, and the experience you had, and I get how that has then impacted what you're doing today?
Yeah. As a little girl, so I'm mixed race. I'm a Black mixed race woman. My mother is white, my father is Black. And when I was 4, my parents split up, and my mother is Scottish. And because of the relationship that she'd had with my father, she was almost banished from Scotland by her family because he was a Black man. So even before I was born, my mother was dealing with racism for the fact that she had me, in her tummy. But when I was 4, my parents split up, and we moved from Taunton in Somerset to a small market town in the Cotswolds, Stroud. And in those days, in the 80s and 90s, really to present day, when I was growing up there, I did not see any other Black people, any other mixed race children, anyone that looked like me. They weren't there. So therefore, from as young as I can remember, and one of the stories that I talk about in the book, I was the target. I was target for children, adults in a subconscious way, of racism, of rural racism, of being in living in a town where there is such a lack of diversity for it to be not there at all. And because of how different you look, I had an afro. I was a lot darker when I was younger. As I've got older, I've lightened up a lot, but I was a lot darker when I was younger. I was never mistaken for a white person. I was always racialized as Black. So that's a really important, I think, point, is that, you can be mixed race. My sister is racialized as white. So you put my sister and I next to each other. When we were young, my sister to the present day has never experienced any form of racism. She presents as white. Whereas I present as black. I presented as black as a child. So therefore my experience of racism was not one that I could share even with her. I couldn't share it with my mum because she's white. She had never experienced anything like this. And, it was really, I explained some circumstances within the book to give an understanding as to what that's like for a little girl and a teenager in order to deal with that. But it was horrific. It was a daily occurrence. It was trauma inducing. It would spark anxiety. And what I didn't know at the time, the bad thoughts that I would have, the fact that I could never enjoy joyful things because I was always worried about the bad thing coming. That those kind of mild depressive episodes that I would experience as a child and then went on to grow as a teenager and as an adult, even before I was diagnosed with postnatal depression, all stem from the trauma of having to endure. Is my hair going to be, are they going to try and set my hair alight today? Am I going to have to numb myself on the bus because they're throwing things at me, because they're shouting the N-word, they're shouting these horrific, they're referring to me as, slaves and all of these things that were said and done to me that I had to, from such a young age, an age that no child, no matter whether they're a child of color or if they're unique and different in any way, should have to endure. The fact that I felt as if I had to endure that alone because I didn't have community. I didn't have a friend I didn't have family that looked like me. It caused trauma that even to present day that I still have, I still have therapy for. And part of that journey in terms of addiction and mental health issues stems, when I trace it back, stems from being a target, being different, feeling othered, feeling no sense of belonging, not just in community, but also that sense of belonging even in my own family. I didn't look like my mum and sister. I couldn't brush my hair or put it up in the same way as my mother and sister. My skin reacted to the sun differently to my mother and sister. So I felt very, very alone, and I felt as though I was constantly having to prove via education, via being a good girl, via keeping myself very small. I was very shy as a child. I was either having to prove my worth by the results that I would get, or I was having to hide myself away, because to hide myself away meant that I could be invisible and maybe I wouldn't be targeted. And that very much has fed into my life, fed into the work that I do now, in the sense of feeling so passionate about people feeling community, feeling that they belong, feeling that they can see themselves, having safe spaces in order to talk about their experiences, but not just talk about it, but action being taken around how to negate those experiences happen, creating a sporting sector in trail running that if I'm a woman and I'm out on the trails and something happens to me, no matter what my color, no matter what my sexual orientation, no matter how I look, how I show up in this world, that I'm going to get help too, that someone's going to reach out and give me their hand too, because there are sections of society that currently, due to what's going on in the world, don't feel that. And that very much informs that childhood experience, that teenage experience. It informs all of the work that I do now, because ultimately I'm a community creator. I'm a mum and a grandmum who wants to leave this world and the places that I inhabit in it in a little bit better of a way than I found it.
How extraordinary is Sabrina? I feel so inspired having spoken to her. If you enjoyed the podcast, there are over 160 episodes featuring conversations with women's sport trailblazers that are free to listen to on all podcast platforms or on our website at fearlesswomen.co.uk. Previous guests include activists like Sabrina, along with broadcasters, elite athletes, officials and coaches, scientists, CEOs and journalists. As well as listening to all of the podcasts on the website, you can find out more about the Women's Sport Collective, a free, inclusive community for all women working in sport. The whole of my book, Game On, The Unstoppable Rise of Women's Sport, is also free to listen to on the podcast. Every episode of Series 13 is me reading a chapter of the book. Thanks once again to Sport England for backing the Game Changers through the National Lottery, and to Sam Walker at What Goes On Media, who does such an incredible job as our executive producer. Thank you also to my brilliant colleague at Fearless Women, Kate Hannon. You can find the Game Changers podcast on all the regular platforms. Do follow us now so you don't miss out on future episodes. And if you have a moment to leave a rating or a review, it really would be fantastic, as it helps us to reach new audiences. Do come and say hello on social media, where you'll find me at Sue Anstis. The Game Changers. Fearless Women in Sport.